again for attending this session. So this is at the heart of the matter. So today we're going to be talking about teacher autonomy versus dependence with professional learning. And so I'm excited to have you here with us today. And again, Jennifer, thank you so much for that introduction. And I don't know about you guys, but I fell into the trap, the Chat GPT Facebook challenge trap. And so I think everything that Jennifer said about me is kind of summed up in this image right here. So again, I am the Innovation and Strategic Learning Facilitator with the Office of Professional Learning in Cumberland County Schools. And we're going to jump into the heart of the matter. And so we're going to try and get out of today's session within this 1 hour. I want us to differentiate between professional development, which really is about compliance, and professional learning, which is about capacity from a leadership perspective in whatever role that we play today. We're going to identify some dependency traps that hinder teacher autonomy, because that is the goal. We want them to be able to just independently, without a second thought, do some of the things that we're trying to get them to grow in, practices we're getting them to grow in. And then we are going to examine strategies to close the gap with support from building leaders. And we're going to talk about how do we get them in that buy-in. So to get started, we're going to talk about the crush versus the commitment. So the goal is that we're trying to build capacity in our teachers. So it doesn't matter whether you're trying to teach them a new tech tool and how to implement it meaningfully, whether it's a classroom management strategy or an instructional strategy, we're looking at building that capacity in them. And so capacity building means the teacher is more capable after you leave the room than they were when you entered. So I want you to think about this question, and I want you to put it in the chat. So it says, what does capacity building in our teachers means to you? So tell me, what would it look like for you according to your role? So if you are a principal or assistant principal, it might be something that you believe. What specifically is it you think capacity building in your teachers are? What is it they should be able to do after you've left that room? If you are a tech facilitator, specifically, what capacity in your teachers are you trying to build? What does that specifically look like where they don't need you once you're not there anymore? So take a couple of minutes in the chat. I'm going to give you about 2 minutes to do that. And talk to me about what does capacity for your teachers, if they were autonomous, they could do it on their own after you left. What are you trying to build in them, and what does that look like? Take about 30 more seconds. Okay. If Jennifer or someone would kind of share out, or Lauren share out a few that we have in the chat.
Absolutely. I was really struck by Lindsay's. Lindsay said it is being intentional in their instruction in a way that allows for innovation for the teacher and the student, increased engagement, increased confidence for the teacher, and increased community within the classroom.
Okay. And so, what I want you to think about, I want you to kind of go back to what you put in the chat. So, when we think about relationships, because this is really like a relationship between us as leaders and our teachers. And so, we want to have that cohesive relationship. How often in the past, back in the day when you're in high school and you had that great love, that crush, or now as a committed person to you and your significant other, how often has it been that you have told your significant other or they've told you like, I don't know what you want from me. You keep saying these things, but I don't know what that is. Can you just tell me what it is? So kind of give me a thumbs up, a hands up if you've kind of heard that before. And so when we think about that, we put in the chat some of those things that we believe capacity looks like, but we got to get granular into that and be more specific. We have to name the skill and be specific about it. So like if I told my husband, you're just not loving me the way that I need you to, and he's like, well, tell me how you need to. Like, I can't read your mind, be specific. So like if you want teachers to build relationships, or you want them to be problem solvers in something, what is that something? And what exactly does that look like? Like, how would it look in the classroom? So, to build teacher autonomy, one of the first things we have to do is refine and really name the skill that we want them to be competent in and be able to be independent in doing. And so, knowing and doing. So there's something called the knowing and doing gap. And it's that disconnect between what educators learn in a professional learning session, that's the knowing, and what they apply in their classrooms. I know we've all been there. Like, we've been there with our students, we've been there with our teachers. Like, if they would just do one thing I told them, I keep telling them, I've showed them this over and over and over and over again, and it's just like something is not clicking. They know it. They were in your session, and oftentimes they loved it. They go out like ranting and raving. Oh, I give that a 10 on a scale from 1 to 5. Like off the meters. They're excited about it, but when they leave that session and you go do some follow up, you don't see anything that you've kind of taught them to do or you've showed them to do. So the knowing and doing gap is very real, and is very real in education. So it's the knowledge that we give them in our workshops, but it's that gap between actually seeing that action in the classroom. So the next question I want you to think about, again, this is like a relationship. So I've been telling you how to love me. They're still not doing it. Maybe I'm not being specific enough, but I'm starting to see some red flags too. So I want you to think about those red flags in your role. What is a red flag that the learning, what you've kind of told them to do, is becoming a one-off crush? So when you actually go and try and follow up and see it, what are some of those red flags that tell you, they haven't even been trying this? What are the things you see that are evidence of that gap? So I want to give you a couple of minutes to process that and think about it, and then put your answers in the chat. Okay, take about 30 more seconds for that. Hey, would someone like to share out loud? Like what's if someone has something that really grinds your gears, like Peter Griffin would say on Family Guy, this that really grinds my gears. Or
I'll
if
share
my
mine.
co-host, go ahead. Yes,
Yeah.
Desiree. Yes, ma'am.
So I'm very much an over communicator. So when I go in and ask, "Hey, how's it going?" Were you able to? And I give kind of explicit detail, like from a PD session of, "Hey, how's this specific thing from the PD going? Have you tried this? Blah blah. It's going okay. It's good." And we can't give any more detail of like the how it was applied, like the actionable things. I know that you really didn't do the thing, or maybe you thought you did it, but probably not the way that we had intended or discussed.
Okay, great. Someone else. I know two that kind of resonated with me. Like I love Lindsay's. She said having the coaching conversation and hearing, yeah, I'm teaching that lesson on Thursday. So not the day that you're in the room. They're going to be teaching it some other day. So I love that one. And how Tanya said putting off implementation until just the right time lesson or class kind of goes along with that. Or the red flag, like you go in the class and they're trying to give you the dog and pony show and it is crashing and burning. So that's an indication that they haven't even attempted to try and refine it before. So just like any relationship, sometimes we ignore the red flags, and we get caught up in this cycle of an unhealthy dependence. And so we don't want that to happen in our roles as instructional and tech leaders. And so be sure you're looking out for what those red flags are. And because what we are looking for versus what we're not looking for, we're not looking for dependent teachers, teachers who demonstrate script fidelity. And I know there is this big thing now because of the type of teachers we have now. All of them don't have that background in education. And so often now curriculum is scripted out from them for them. And they can read that script with fidelity, but sometimes they don't even internalize that script. And it's just like go with the flow right there in the moment. So we want to move from having teachers who demonstrate script fidelity to those that can make instructional decisions really well right there on the spot. What is going to be best for my kids? How does this fit my third period class versus my first period class? We want to move from those teachers where you're fixing the lessons for them. I've been there as an instructional coach to helping build models and instructional designs with them, not for them. So we want to make sure that we're moving towards that. And we want to move from you being the help desk. I don't know about y'all, but I was stuck there too, especially when it came to technology. So can you just set that up for me right quick? I mean, I've really tried. I don't get it. So we want to move from being the help desk to teacher autonomy, where the teacher is being a strategic designer and a problem solver themselves. Oftentimes, people just do not want to put into the energy of solving the problem from themselves because they know someone else is going to do it for them, eventually step in. And so, those are some things that we want to avoid if we're trying to move from teacher dependence to teacher autonomy. And so, there are some traps that we get involved in that kind of perpetuate that dependency. So, a dependency trap is a cycle where the leaders prioritize immediate results or technical efficiency over long term intellectual growth for their staff. And there's reasons why we do it. Okay, first one is speed and priority. You do the work for the teacher. Look, they just not getting it. Let me just do this for you right quick. As I've been in this classroom over and over and over again. So it's just best for me to get it out of the way. It's going to be done right. I'm not going to have to come back and help you fix it again. So that's kind of what goes into our minds. But they become dependent on that. Then it's the external locus of control. The teacher becomes unable to pivot or troubleshoot themselves without you there or without the specific manual or document there. They've become dependent on us. Like, Miss Johnson, can you just come? I can't do it. I can't do it without you. Can you just show me one more time? So they can't pivot on their own. So it's speed, it's they don't feel like they have control over to handle it themselves. And then we pay a tax on that. So we might be saving time in the short term to do it for them, to be there by their side and hold their hand. But the teacher never builds that capacity that we're actually looking for. We want them to handle it independently. But when we get caught up in these dependency traps, we pay a price for it. And then another thing in relationships, I know you've heard, I teach people how to treat me. So if I'm constantly doing it for you, that's how they're going to constantly come to me. And so they are treating me as like she's the tool that's going to do it. I know she is. She has a good heart, and she's always going to follow through and help me out and do it for me. Okay. And I allow it. So we've got to break away from those things by putting certain pieces in place. So we've got to recognize those red flags. And we've got to recognize these dependency traps, because if we don't, we are setting ourselves up for heartbreak with our teachers, with expecting to see these great things going on in their classrooms on their own after we've walked away from showing it to them. So these are some common leadership dependency traps. So principles. Mandating usage minutes. Okay, so many minutes a day. I want to make sure y'all are doing learning.com. You're doing some other initiative that we're doing. You're looking at the clock and the minutes, but you're not looking at the quality of what's happening in the classroom. So we've got to be mindful of that. Using fixed compliant checklists. And so that one gets really tricky when we talk about building administrators, because they are evaluators. And sometimes they'll get caught up. Okay, I used to work with my ILT team, so I know that checklist. Let me go in and check for these things, yada, yada, yada. And then I'm gone. I've done a walkthrough. I've done a visit. So we've got to make sure we walk away or we get away from some of those compliant pieces, because that's not about real teacher growth and autonomy. Or prioritizing the script fidelity. Okay, the curriculum says you should be on this unit on this day at this time. They're not there. You didn't use that exact resource. Now, I get standards align resources, but we've got to have some leeway and flexibility in some of those things when it comes to curriculum and outstanding things that are happening in the classroom. So those are some common building administrator traps. For tech coaches, we've talked about this and you've probably been there and done it, so have I. Setting up accounts for teachers. Rescuing live tech glitches. Now, sometimes it's going to be a glitch that we have to come in and give our expertise and help. But sometimes if they simply troubleshoot, so you've seen, everyone can't see the document. I'm not sure where to go. Did you even try and look at the share button and see what the share settings were on your own? And so those types of things, y'all laughing because you've seen it. Pushing tools without the pedagogy behind it. And sometimes we'll get so excited about a tech tool and we can't wait to share it. But what happens is teachers get caught up in the excitement of the tool and not the application that actually helps transform learning for students. And so those are some of the things that are traps for us. Instructional coaches, you give advice versus asking questions. If you ask questions more, they're more likely to get to the solution and reflect and think for themselves. And so they are able to internalize it more as well, because it comes from within them, not so much what you told them to do. or what you told them to try. Providing pre-made lesson decks. And I get it in the day of age of international teachers, teachers that don't have an educational background. But we've got to build that capacity to where teachers can be innovative and creative outside of a scripted curriculum that's always given to them. And then as well, fixing lessons for the teacher. Okay. So these are common dependency traps that we got to try and walk away from. And so some of our dependency traps also deal with, are we doing professional development or are we doing professional learning? And so I'm going to give you a moment. I want you to read over this slide to yourselves. I'm going to give you about 30 more seconds to skim through that. And so if you are not familiar, there are actually standards for professional learning, national standards for professional learning. And that is through an organization called Learning Forward. When I tell you this opened my mind and I was mind blown when I really dug into those standards for professional learning. If you haven't, it is definitely something that you should kind of dive deep into. But they stress there's a difference between that sit and get one time only, that crush professional development versus professional learning. So as you look through these, either share out loud or put in the chat what are some of the things that resonated with you, your first thoughts or impressions when you kind of read over the slide. And it might kind of relate to something you've done or you've seen done or you've experienced.
Okay, I'm just going to share because I have lots of connections to this.
Okay.
My thought is that professional learning is when you have a clear vision and a culture for your school or your district, and you know where you're trying to get to, why you're trying to get there, and so that you kind of enact this pathway of it turning into professional learning. And if there isn't a clear vision or a clear pathway of what is occurring or what the goal is, then it always will stay in this PD mindset of one and done. This is a cool idea. Try it if you want. It might be cool for you, maybe not for somebody else. So I just think professional learning is very much rooted in that vision and goal setting for a whole culture of a school or a district.
Hey, awesome. Jennifer, if there's one in the chat that you could share out.
Sure. And so several of them are kind of similar. Sometimes we're asked to go do a PD. And so when we're going to do that PD, oftentimes we're checking a box for a system or for a school or for a group of teachers. And so A, it's driven by compliance, but B, we also are not necessarily going to be in the situation where we can support implementation, have any measure of accountability. Sometimes there's not leaders or coaches present when we're doing the training who can do those pieces when we're not there. And so it very much resonated in similar ways for several of us.
I'm going to
So
piggyback off of what Jennifer just said. I think that's really important when we're not in a building where, we're engaging with the people every single day, and we're in front of our people and we're telling them the things, and, we're leading them to do better and be better, but there's no accountability for that at the building level, and we can't be in all places at all times. That's when I feel that frustration. Just in that implementation and consistency.
Okay, so talk to me about, I want you to take about 30 seconds to think about it. What was the last professional development that you experienced as a participant? So think about the difference between the two and kind of think of it in terms of, because sometimes, like, I know everyone in this room, we are just learners at heart. So we can take some things from a sit and get PD and really put it into action. But think about a PD that you attended and that you've experienced that it was great. It might have been great, or it might have been horrible, might have been a horrible first date, or it might have been that fantastic, I think I've met the love of my life. But then a couple of days later, it just kind of fizzled out. Like, oh, yeah, I did go out with that person. So think about one of those PDs that you've attended and kind of hold it in your mind for a second. Okay, so you should have that PD in your mind, not the professional learning, but the PD in mind. Let's share out loud. This is our safe space. We could share out loud. What's a PD you attended? I'll actually start. I remember the first year that I went to ISTE in Philadelphia back in 2018, 2019. And it was a session on 40 different tech tools to use in your classroom. And I was gung-ho excited. I was like, I'm gonna write them all down. And I hope he gives me the deck. And oh wow, that looks really cool. I'm gonna try that. And then I got home, and after that summer, that it all fizzled out. It was just like I was excited at one time for that date. I never saw that date again in my entire life. So not that it was bad, but I didn't get anything out of it that I could actually put into action because it was all so quick and fast, high speed. This is just what it is and what you can do with it. Okay, now go. So anyone else would like to share in the chat or out loud? And you know what? Nobody wants to remember that horrible date. So do we have anyone else that wants to share? Because we can go over to the next, that fantastic piece you've seen when you fall in love with someone, and it is love at first sight. You've already planning out the wedding. You know what y'all gonna do. You already imagining what the kids gonna look like and everything. So now what I want you to do is think about a professional learning opportunity that you've attended as a participant, and kind of when you have it, share it in the chat, or you can share it out loud. I love seeing y'all bad PD dates that you've had.
sometimes I'm just going to say the one I'm thinking of as my professional development, my PD, was one that also at ISTE was on Book Creator, and the presenter was fabulous. Her name was Jen, and I came out so excited and ready to use it. But sometimes like time is a problem, and accessibility. Like, do we have access to that version that we saw that did all of the things in order to be able to implement? And so I think making sure that we're choosing or we're designing professional development or professional learning that is relevant and attainable once we leave that space.
Yes, and to piggyback on that, also, like, inevitably I'll even have a question about the one thing, like I missed one thing in a note, or it wasn't in the slides, and it's usually a very simple fix. And of course the presenters always give you their emails and you can follow up, but that feels burdensome and like a lot. But I totally agree. Like, I get really excited and then I go and try to do it. It's anytime that follow up is not intentional and like pre-planned and accessible, I feel like it falls back to PD pretty quickly for me.
Okay, thank you for sharing. Anybody want to share out a professional learning opportunity that really stands out with them?
I want to speak out just because I'm going to give a shout out to y'all that when I was a new coach, and when I did your coaching cohort through the digital teaching learning group, it was one of the best professional learning activities I have ever done, because I'm still thinking back to that. And that was probably over 3 years ago. So very useful applied strategies. We got to practice them right in the time, and it was continuous. We were able to keep coming back to that group. Anyway, shout out to this group. That's why I'm here today. I wouldn't be on this Zoom today had it not been for that session.
I agree with Julie about the digital teach and learn. The coaching network. I agree. Same with that. The other one for me is Math Foundations, the math program through NCSIP, and just the way that program. I mean, it's revamped, so I can't speak to the new version, but how it was. And I'm a trainer for that, and seeing the impact it had on me as a teacher, and then the impact it has on teachers that I work with now. I think both of those, and I think it's because it's over time. It's because it's an ongoing thing, and you have that support built in, like the coaching network had that support built in. I think those were great.
Okay, awesome. So hold on and think about those key pieces that made that professional learning opportunity so different from the PDs that we've gone to. I want everything to build on each other. So I want you to think about, what are some red flags I'm seeing? I want you to think about, what does capacity really look like when I'm doing follow-ups, or even when I'm designing my professional learning. So if I'm building capacity in my teachers, what is that skill? You got to get granular and really identify what that skill is to plan out the professional learning that is going to be collaborative, that is going to have opportunities for coaching and for mentoring, and tied to specific student outcomes. So those are the things that we want, and we want to see teachers do it independently. We've kind of got to hone in on what those skills are. And as we design, we need to be mindful. Am I designing a PD, or am I designing a professional learning opportunity for my teachers? So keep those things in mind. And so closing the gap with professional learning relationship standards. So we want to close that knowing and doing gap.
So better not.
So they come in and we're doing it, and we're learning it, and we're doing it well. And then we want them to put it in action. So with every relationship, we have our standards. So my standards are like, I want to go on date night every month. Okay. I have standards of how I want you to treat me. I have standards of I want you to open the door for me when we go somewhere. So when we have professional learning, we should have those standards as well. So those standards include modeling. That's the first date. Show it, don't just tell it. I shared a book, I believe, in the last session that telling ain't training. And so that's a phenomenal book to look at. As well, I think we'll get to the practice piece. So yes, time to practice is the second one. So my first date, I model it. I show you what I'm looking for and what capacity looks like. And then the second piece is time to practice. That's the courtship part of it. So learning requires slow time. I know we want things to happen, but they just don't happen overnight. So are you providing that time for your teachers to play, to learn, and to actually practice? There's another book, phenomenal book. I'll show it on the screen. This has changed my life. Practice Perfect by Doug Limbaugh. Phenomenal book by educators. Actually, he is the writer of Teach Like a Champion. And so it is him and a team of other teachers that talks about the role of practice and feedback when we're talking about building teacher capacity. I read this in 2 days. I didn't have all my little markers like Lauren has, but I have like almost a whole notebook of notes. And I've already started transforming a lot of my professional learning opportunities based off of the information in this book. And practice is one of those things. And they start with practice really doesn't make perfect, practice makes permanent. So when we have those opportunities to continually to practice those things that we've seen modeled for us, then they start to become habit. They start to become ingrained in us. And he'll take you through about the real parts of coaching and feedback and how that plays into practice, where we want them to practice. And when we see them practicing incorrectly, we need to take that time to pause and then correct so they can practice the correct way. But phenomenal book. I highly suggest it. It will change your life. The next piece. So we've had our first date. I've showed you how I want you to treat me and love me. We've had that courtship where you're actually practicing those things that I told you to put in place. And then next, you want a safe space for errors, the no judgment zone. Okay. So if you love me, don't judge me. Okay. Yes, I like to eat bread and chocolate together. Don't judge me about that. It goes well, it pairs well together. So, but you want to have a judgment-free zone where teachers, when they do practice or when they do try and implement things, there's a safe space and room for error. Okay. So it takes failure sometimes to get to that success, but you want them to make them feel like it's okay, especially if you're doing follow-up. So when you come in, you are being supportive. So remove the evaluation piece of it. We do something called practice clinics where teachers actually practice skills. It's just like sports. It's an intensive small clinic where they practice certain skills, either on classroom management or academic discourse. And we do follow-ups. And so we assure them that we are there as a support role because we all know knows what it felt like when we were a classroom teacher and the administrator walks in. You're like, oh my God. And you start getting nervous. And it's like they checking off a list. Did I do it right? Oh my gosh, it fell apart. It's okay if it falls apart. I'm here to support you to give you some ideas and strategies on how to refine and try it again. And so again, that's really important because even if you're a principal, yes, you are an evaluator, but you are an instructional leader first. And your teachers need to know that you support them and that it is okay for you to make mistakes and that they're going to help guide you to become the teacher that you need to be and that you can become. And then the accountability piece, the commitment, that is a huge piece that we've all just been talking about. So it isn't a checklist, and it's a shared promise to your teachers, between you, your teachers, and your students. It helps you measure progress by student growth not just teacher compliance, and growth of the teacher as well. So it's got to be some sort of accountability piece in there. And I'm going to share with you something we've done in our district, in my department, that hones in with that accountability piece. Okay. So we've gone through all the stages. We had our first date where we model the strategies and things we want to see, that capacity piece. We've had the courtship where we give them time to actually practice and implement, and we provide them feedback on that. And when we do follow up, we have a judgment-free zone for them. It's okay if it doesn't go right the first time. We should expect that, but we should also be in the mindset that this is an opportunity for me to reflect and refine my practice. And then the feedback conversation, of course, is that piece that helps us focus on growth and getting it right. And then accountability. From there, what do I commit to in order to continue my growth? And so I wanted to talk about that accountability piece. So making a commitment, and that means teacher accountability. So again, in our district, we do something called a practice clinic. And at the end of the clinic, teachers, this is like their exit ticket, they have to complete a commitment ladder. The rest of them, practice makes permanent. Let's put practice into actual practice. So on the commitment ladder, they have to provide us, based on what they learned that day, 4 actionable goals or statements of what they're going to implement when they get back to their classrooms. And so, like, this is an example I have from my clinic, Transforming Learning Through Academic Discourse. And they scaffold up. What's the easiest rung to climb onto a ladder? The very bottom one, the first one. So we asked them, create a goal or a commitment statement that's the easiest for you to achieve. Start at the bottom and then scaffold your way up to those that might be a little bit more difficult and that you might need a little bit more support from your principal or your coach. Okay. And so, as you'll see, just from the examples we give them, this is an example ladder that I provide them. I'm very specific. When I ask a question, I will provide a minimum of 60-second think time for all students prior to sharing out answers. We model to them what your commitment ladder looks like. We've already modeled it in our session. They've practiced it in their session. And then we model the commitment ladder, because what will happen if you ask them at the end of a session, oh, tell me one thing you're going to implement today. They can get real broad and vague with that. So again, it's getting down to really identifying the skill of what you want them to do. And from there, we actually use these with our follow-ups. So when I come into the classroom to provide you support to see how well you're moving towards your goal, I can give you feedback. You know what? You are already at rung number 3. You did this very well. I saw that you provided your students think time, appropriate think time based on the questions that you were asking. You made sure to ask your students, did they have any clarifying questions before beginning? Let's talk about some things that on your rung 3 and 4 that you could put in place to help meet those goals. So I can see the progress that those teachers are actually making. Okay, so that's an idea when you think about what is going to be the accountability piece for when you do follow up. So, and how are you going to document that to where the teacher internalizes it themselves and you know kind of what to look for. And so with that, I want to talk about the power couple. It's you and your school's administration or the department leadership that you're working with. We probably all work with really small teams, even on the DPI level. Lauren and Jennifer, your team is small, but you've got a whole state to cover. You've got a whole region to cover. I'm the only full-time professional learning facilitator in my district, and we've got 3,000 plus teachers. It is just me. I have my co-facilitators that help, but amongst 86 schools and sometimes 200 teachers between clinics to actually go follow up and see, that is not sustainable for us to do on our own. And so we want to make sure that we pair up and we get the buy-in from our department leaders and our building administrators to help us sustain that mentality of growth and learning and actually implementing things. And so with that being said, there are 5 levels of evaluation for professional learning, and that is according to a gentleman named Gusky. And so he says the most important one is actually level 3. That's organizational support. If you can't get the buy-in and support from those building leaders and department leaders of the people that you're working with, you're probably not going to see the change on a level that you want to see. So that's important to build that power couple relationship with administrators and department leadership. So often when we have evaluations for professional learning or PD, we ask them, oh, did you enjoy it? Was it a good experience? How would you rate your facilitator? And so that's like level 1. And Gusky says we got to get beyond that. Yeah, level 1 is important to help us grow as facilitators, but then we need to move on to other things like what resonated with you and what will you take out of this? Did you have the organizational support to help you implement and grow in what you're trying to take into your building? The final one is actually student outcomes. How effective was this on student achievement and student outcomes in your class? So Gusky's 5 levels of evaluation are something important to look at when you're talking about your professional learning opportunities. So we know we want administrators to be on board. So they need to be modeled and trained for what support looks like. So as a department, we actually did this for our assistant principals. We know the life of administrators gets bogged down with parents, buses, all sorts of things. Our CTOs have lots of things to deal with. But do they understand what support should look like when their teachers leave our professional development? And how do they assist in that sustainability? So we actually did a training where we provided them strategies on what that would look like. We actually told them what the practice clinics were, what it involved, but what we've asked every department on a district, any department that gives professional learning, we've asked them to create 2 impact questions based on their session. And those impact questions are always provided to building administrators or department leaders to say, hey, your teachers attended this session. Here are 2 impact questions you can use to follow up with those teachers to ensure that the learning and implementation is actually happening. That's an accountability piece. The commitment ladder is one, but if they know that their principals are aware that they're going to come back and follow up with it, that's another accountability piece. And we actually share those commitment ladders with those instructional leadership teams as well. So we send it to them with in an email with the feedback from when we've come to visit and say, we're handed over to you. These are some things that we suggested. This is their commitment ladder. You have the impact questions. Please help support this teacher in their continued growth. So it helps with the buy-in, and we've actually seen a difference. Another piece is, are these people coming to the professional learning opportunities themselves? Gusky made a very good point. He said, when I give a professional learning, if I see the principal get up and walk out, I stop them and tell them, if you walk out, I'm walking out too, because you need to be in this session as well, so you can understand what are the expectations and the capacity that I'm building with your teachers so that you can help support them later on. So making sure you have those open invitations for them. We actually have principals and ILT members that are actually coming in now to experience a practice clinic, so they have that perspective. Because a lot of times you'll hear your teachers in a professional learning say, okay, this is fine and dandy, but what's my principal going to say when they walk in? This is a great strategy, but they're not going to be supportive of this when I try it. So having them there and having that invitation gives them insight to what the expectations of the capacity we're trying to build in them is. And so before we leave, I would like you to make a commitment. So in the chat, I want you to type in 2 actionable steps or goals you will take based off what you've learned today and heard today and prior knowledge to build teacher capacity and autonomy. How are you going to shift your teachers from dependency to autonomy based on some of the things you've learned and combine that with some of the things that you know are right for your teachers? Absolutely, we do. I love what you guys are putting in the chat. I've put a link to the presentation a link to the presentation in the chat as well. I want to give a shout out before we wrap up to the digital learning and school connectivity department and team for always providing. Y'all guys are like the loves of our lives of what professional learning opportunities should be and what they should look like. So thank you for always providing that for us. Thank you for letting me be a part of that process as well.
Thank you so much, Gladys, for your expertise, for making learning fun for adults and so engaging. I don't know about everybody else. I have 2 pages of handwritten notes. I've already placed an order in Amazon during the session. And it looks like I'm making plans to come and visit your work. And so this is how I always feel when I have an opportunity to learn from you. I always leave with more learning goals for myself and just absolutely inspired and excited for next steps. So thank you for blessing us with your talents again this evening, and for everyone's time and commitment to professional learning growth. So we will stay on for a few minutes. We would appreciate it if you complete the feedback survey for us. It really helps us know what you need, what you want, so we can continue to support your efforts. And have a wonderful evening. Stay warm and cozy.